We all love a good deal, right? I mean, who doesn't? But can a price actually be too low? That's what we're going to explore today. The really complex and controversial world of predatory pricing, where a company's best deal might actually be an illegal weapon in disguise.
You know the feeling. You're in the grocery store and you see a rotisserie chicken that costs less than a raw one, or a brand new video game console is being sold at a price that just seems impossibly low. You kind of have to wonder, how are they even making money on this? Well, the short answer is sometimes they aren't.
And that brings us to this really key distinction. On one hand, you have a totally legal strategy called a loss leader. That's the bait. It's a cheap product designed to get you in the door so you'll buy other, more profitable stuff. But on the other hand, you have illegal predatory pricing, which has a much, much darker goal: to basically bleed competitors dry, force them out of business, and then jack up prices once you're the only one left. It all comes down to intent. So let's dig into that. What exactly is the tipping point that turns an aggressive business tactic into an illegal, anti-competitive weapon? Here's the textbook definition for you. The strategy is pretty simple on its face. A company, usually a really big one, intentionally takes a huge financial hit. They sell their products for less than it even costs to make them. The goal isn't to make a profit, not at first anyway. It's to make it absolutely impossible for their smaller rivals to keep up. But here's the thing, selling stuff below cost happens all the time. Just think about the classic razor and blades model, right? You get the razor handle for next to nothing, but the company makes all its money selling you those expensive replacement blades for years to come. That's a totally legal loss leader strategy. So this brings us to the big question. Where does the law actually draw the line? All right, let's get into the legal side of this, because the standard for proving predatory pricing is, and I can't stress this enough, notoriously difficult. So the modern test we use today actually comes from a 1993 Supreme Court case, Brook Group versus Brown and Williamson Tobacco. The whole case revolved around this absolutely brutal price war in the generic cigarette market, and it ended up setting an incredibly high bar for anyone trying to sue for predatory pricing.
What came out of that case is what's now known as the two-pronged test, and you have to prove both parts. Otherwise, your case is pretty much dead in the water.
So here's the test. First, you have to prove that the prices were actually below cost. That's already really hard to do. But the second part, this idea of recoupment, that's the real killer. You have to prove that the predator had a dangerous probability, that's the legal term, of making all its money back by jacking up prices to monopoly levels after they've killed off the competition. And here's the logic the court uses. If the predator can't eventually make back its losses, then the whole scheme fails, right? They just lose a ton of money, and in the process, all of us consumers got to enjoy ridiculously low prices. So from the court's point of view, if there's no recoupment, the failed predator just gave everyone a gift. And this really skeptical view is baked right into the legal precedent. The Supreme Court has flat out said that these kinds of schemes are implausible and rarely tried, and even more rarely successful. Basically, the courts tend to believe that predatory pricing is just an irrational business strategy. But, and this is a huge but, while the courts see it as irrational, modern economists are on a completely different page. The consensus view among them is that, yeah, predatory pricing can be a totally rational and successful strategy. It's a way to signal to the market that you're going to be hyper-aggressive, to scare off investors from funding your rivals, and ultimately, to dominate a market. So the law is kind of based on an economic theory that a lot of economists don't even agree with anymore. So what's the result of this super high legal bar and all this skepticism from the judges? Well, look at this number. Since that big Supreme Court decision back in 1993, that's how many plaintiffs have successfully won a predatory pricing case in federal court. 0. A big, fat 0. So does that mean predation just doesn't happen anymore? Or is it just that it's become impossible to prove? Well, let's fast forward to today and look at a modern case that's testing these very questions in the age of big tech and algorithms. So let's talk about Project Nessie. According to an ongoing lawsuit from the FTC, this was a secret Amazon algorithm. But here's the twist on the classic strategy. The FTC alleges Nessie wasn't just about lowering prices to crush competitors. It was also used to test how high Amazon could raise prices to see if other retailers would follow them up, essentially using its market power to pull the entire market's prices higher. And you should know, this apparently wasn't some tiny, short-lived experiment. The FTC claims this was a multi-year strategy. In fact, at its peak, in a single month back in 2018, the tool was setting prices on over 8 million different items that Amazon sells.
And if you want to get a sense of the scale we're talking about, check this out. The FTC claims that through these tactics, Amazon extracted over $1 billion in extra profits directly from American households.
Now, it's really important here to look at both sides. The FTC is calling this a secret tool that was used to artificially inflate prices across the entire market. Amazon, for its part, claims Nessie was actually used to stop unsustainable price matching that was leading to prices that were too low. They also say the project was shut down years ago. That case is still playing out.
And all of this brings us right back to the central dilemma, the real puzzle that makes this whole topic so incredibly difficult for courts, for regulators, and for businesses to deal with.
Because we know what the long-term dangers are if predation is successful. When competitors get wiped out, the one dominant company left has very little reason to innovate or improve, and every reason to raise prices. In the end, we as consumers lose choices, and we end up paying more.
And that right there is the tightrope that regulators have to walk. How in the world do you write a law that can stop a company from weaponizing low prices to kill off its rivals without accidentally punishing legitimate sales, deep discounts, and all the aggressive price cutting that, let's be honest, we as consumers absolutely love? And this challenge is only getting more and more complex. With AI and algorithms setting millions of prices in real time, that line between healthy, aggressive competition and illegal monopolistic behavior is getting blurrier than ever. It leaves us with this really critical question for the future of our markets. How can we tell a fair fight from a fixed one when the fight itself is being run by code?